Hi everyone, my name is Agata and I am a part of the marketing team at RICON, and welcome to our session on pre-engineered beam hangers. I'd like to draw your attention to the panel on the right-hand side of the screen. In the panel you will find a handout section with a copy of today's slides as well as the American Beam Hanger Design Guide. You'll also find a question section which you can use throughout the presentation. And please note that we will wait until the end of the presentation to answer any questions. So without any further ado, I'd like to kick things off by welcoming Dominic Robitaille, one of our engineers. Dominic, over to you.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Beam Hanger webinar. So wood construction has evolved a lot in the last few years, from on-site cut and frame stick frame construction to pre-manufactured wall, floor, and ceiling elements to mass timber products and construction. But what about the connector used? For a stick frame construction, no one would think of creating a custom connector for an I-joist connection. No, we would simply select the proper pre-engineered connector. But what about mass timber? In this industry, products may vary in size and in type, so we need connectors that are adaptable. Previously, the only options were custom connector. So let's take a look at the current state of the market, comparing products according to two axes. The simplicity axis, where on the left, we have a complex connector that need extra detailing, extra calculation, and extra installation time. And on the right side, we have the simple connectors that are pre-engineered. The other axis is the strength axis, where we have on the bottom here stick frame construction with the stick frame connectors with lower capacities, and on the top we have mass timber with connectors that have higher capacities. So our first example here is the bolted knife plate. It's pretty strong, but typically has small installation tolerances and will need custom design. And it's pretty hard to install on site as well. The other example is the bucket seat. It's really strong and has high tolerances, but it's exposed, so no fire rating, and it will require custom engineering as well. On the other side of the spectrum, we have a pre-engineered connector designed for stick frame construction, but these cannot support mass timber elements. So what we're suggesting today is the first pre-engineered connectors, especially designed for North America. So I'll begin by showing you a small video highlighting the installation and all that stuff. So as you can see here, the connectors are pre-installed. They're pre-installed on the beam and in the columns. So the beam can simply be lifted from the truck bed and dropped in place. So this is the First Tech Credit Union project in Hillsboro, near Portland, Oregon. It's one of the biggest mass timber projects in the US, with over 150,000 square foot of commercial office space. And the mass timber portion of the project was erected in only 12 weeks. So that's pretty impressive. And they did all that while using our pre-engineered connection system, which really improved the installation speed. And as you can see here in the video also, all the connections are completely concealed for fire design in a beautiful architectural finish. And we'll see another example here of the installation. The beam is simply dropped in place with a crane. So hi, my name is Dominic Robitaille. I'll be your host today. I'm a technical advisor engineer at RICON, a specialized mass timber connection system supplier. And that's a picture of me here playing with a screw, as one does at RICON. So what are the objectives of this webinar? We'll go over 3 questions: what, why, and how. So what is the beam hanger system? We'll go over a simple hardware presentation. Why we say the beam hanger system is the cost-effective solution on the market. And spoiler alert, it's because it's pre-engineered, pre-installed, and easily concealed. And we'll go over the how to use the beam hanger system, and that's with the design yet, and we'll go deeper into that. So let's begin with the what. So what is the beam hanger system? It's 2 identical components, and they each have a male and a female element, as you can see here. Male and female. So one half of the connector is mounted with the color bolt facing upward, and the other half with the color bolt facing downward. So you begin by installing the first half of the connector to the beam with fully threaded screws, and same thing for the second half of the connector. You install it to the post or girder. We have a post example here. So you pre-install the two connectors, like there's one here also and one here, and you simply drop the beam in place. And if you do the housing correctly, you have a fully concealed connection. Okay, so what is the beam hanger system? It's a simple pre-engineered solution for mass timber. Okay, so let's go over the why now. So why do we say it's the cost-effective solution on the market? So first, because it's pre-installed, which allows it to have repetitive and simple installation in a controlled work environment, which also allows for superior quality control. So because it's done in a controlled environment, it's easier to choose who's going to work, who's going to do the work, maybe a more experienced worker, because it's all done at the same place. In a warehouse, as we can see here in the example, so there's good lighting, it's warm, no rain, no snow, and it's just way safer for the workers. And which leads me to the other point, it's the on-site installation. So we have drop-in assembly, which reduces the crane time, reduces the personnel needed on site, and there's no power tools required to install the beams. And this is all because it's pre-installed. So second reason, it's because it's pre-engineered. And we say it's a pre-engineered system, and this is because of the design guide, which has tabulated design values for a connector that has installer-friendly tolerances. The design guide also contains details for simple tilt and slope connection, and all that allows for a reduced detailing time. So right now we only have a design guide for the US, but a Canadian version is coming out soon. And we'll go over the design guide a bit more in the out section, so don't worry about that. So we say it's easily concealed, which allows it to be fire rated. And we conducted full-scale fire tests, as you can see here in the picture. This is after an hour and a half in the oven, so still standing. And we were awarded a 1-hour fire rating with 1.5 inches of wood cover. And we'll go over that in the house section again, but this is all achieved with no special detailing. So that's pretty good. So why do we say it's the cost-effective solution on the market? Because it's, sorry. So let's compare the beam hanger to the custom connector for the total cost of the connection. So at first, the hardware cost may be a bit more expensive, but if you add the engineering time, the detailing time, the installation time, and then finally the on-site work, you can start to see the cost effectiveness of the beam hanger. But where the beam hanger really sets itself apart is if you have a special connection or if you need a fire rating. Because we already did all the testing, there's no extra work needed. And that's where a custom connection can really get expensive, so as you can see on the graph here. So the hardware package may look a bit more expensive at first, but the total cost of the connection is way more economical compared to using a custom connector. Okay, so why do we see the beam hanger is the cost-effective solution on the market? Because it's pre-installed, which allows for repetitive installation, superior quality control, drop-in assembly. Because it's pre-engineered with clear and detailed instruction, it has installer-friendly tolerances, and it's fully concealed for an architecturally appealing look and for the fire design. And yeah, so these three factors make it the cost-effective solution on the market. Sorry about that. So let's go over the how now. So how to use the beam hanger system, and that's with the design guide. So we'll quickly go over the design guide, but know that these subjects are all explored thoroughly in the design guide if you need more details. So Let's begin with step 1, selecting the beam hanger. So we have 5 different connectors. There are 2 smaller ones that are 2 and 3/8 of an inch wide, and 3 other ones that are 3 and 1/8 of an inch wide. And the XL, so this one here, even has an extended welded bearing plate for heavier loads. So we have allowable loads from 3 kips to 17 kips. So let's take an example with the selection table we have right here. So let's say you have a 5x14 section. So you'd begin by going through the minimum beam width. So you'd go below 6, so in this section here, and 14 inches, so this part here. So you have 4 connector possible, either the 140x60, the 200x60, the 200x80, or the 290x80. So if you need an allowable of 9 kits, for example, you would select the RICON 290x80, so this one here. And on the right side of the table here, you can see 2 RICONs. This is for double connections. So if you have a wider beam, you can do parallel double connections, but if you have a narrower beam, you can do staggered connection, like so. So it's just important that if you do staggered connection, you remember that the color both need a clear installation path for the beam to be dropped in place. So you have to make sure there's room here. So it's important that the 2 connectors are not on top of each other. So let's go to step 2 now, detailing. So earlier I said this connector has installer-friendly tolerances. This is because you only need to take into account 3 factors: minimum beam size, edge distance, and spacing. And spacing is only if you have 2 connectors or more. And as for positioning, it can vary, but you have to remember a few things. So let's go over an example of positioning here. Positioning a connector into a joist, for example. So you can either position the connector at the bottom of the beam, like this, or you can put it at the top of the beam. But if you put it at the top of the beam, the wood in between the lowest screw, so this one here, and the bottom of the joist here, is not engaged in the connection. It's as if it's the equivalent of using an ankle bracket with a big notch. So it's only a virtual notch, but it's important to reinforce it accordingly. Same thing for the header positioning. You can either put the connector at the top of the beam or at the bottom of the beam. But if you do, it's important to reinforce the beam to make sure the wood is engaged properly. So this part here is engaged, and that's why you use the fully threaded screw. So yeah, so the reinforcement is done with fully threaded screw, which are approved by the ACC. So you can reinforce from below and from the top for the joist and the header. So it's really flexible depending on the situation you're in. So for my first tip of the day, positioning, do it right the first time. For the girder, for example, the highest screw has to be in the top 30% of the beam. So that's a bad example here. What you want is something like this, where the top screw is in the top 30%. Same thing for similar thing for the joist. You want your lowest screw in the bottom 30% of the beam, like this. And that's all explained in the design guide. So let's go to step 3 now, housing. So the design guide contains clear and detailed instruction with precise rendering to make sure your housing is done right. But the one thing I really want to talk about right now is the housing should always be done in the girder or the post. If you do the housing in the joist, like we see here, you'll have to add a wood plug below here to make sure that it's properly concealed. For this one here, you don't have to plug this because there's a floor here. And it's even easier for the CNC machining if you do the housing in the post or the girder, and it's simpler. It simplifies fire design because again, you don't need to plug the holes. So let's go to step 4, fire design. So there's no extra research and development needed. There's no special detailing needed because you only need to increase the edge distance. You need to increase the wood cover. to the appropriate fire, depending on the fire rating you need. But like I said earlier, you can have a 1 hour fire rating if you have an inch and a half of wood cover. And this is all possible because of our US-based full-scale fire testing. These tests were done at the Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio, Texas, and it confirmed the wood charring method. As you can see in the picture here, the char is insulating the inside of the beam and protecting the connections. So because the testing was done in a third party, it really eased the process with design approval. Okay, so let's go to my next step, step 5, uplift solutions. So for uplift, we have two different hardware solutions, a fully threaded toe screw and a spring steel clip lock. So the toe screw can either be installed on top of the beam, like so here, or on the side of the beam if the beam is wide enough and there's enough space. The clip lock is pre-installed, like we have an example here. So let's go for my tip, and this for the uplift. So for the toe screw, it's a more adaptable solution and it has higher capacities, but the clip lock is totally integrated. It's gonna lock itself in place once the beam is dropped in position. So that reduces the on-site work time. So it really depends on what you need here. Okay, so the final step, for the final step, let's go over why the beam hanger is truly an adaptable solution. So we have with the concrete connections, with the steel connection, and skewed connection. And that's where it really gets interesting. We can even do double tilt connection with simple detailing. And you only need, that's all because you only need two parallel faces for the connection to work. So let's take a look at the first example. Here, the slope connection. As I said, you have two parallel faces. So those two are parallel faces. And it's simple detailing, same as usual. Because you have two parallel faces, the beam can simply be dropped in place. So no extra detailing. And let's take a look here. That's a top view of a skewed connection. So same thing here. We have two parallel faces. So it's easy installation. The only thing you need to take into account here is that the secondary beam has to be aligned with the center line. Well, the connector has to be aligned with the center line of the beam. So yeah, you have to take this into account. But a great example for the flexibility of this connector or the adaptability of this connector is this project here, the Rocky Ridge Recreation Facility. It's one of the largest wood roof in the world, and it's Rocky Ridge in Alberta, Canada, and it used over 1,800 connector. And because of the double curvature of the roof, as we can see, like the curvature like this way and this way, every single connections were slightly different from one another. So think about all the detailing nightmare that brings. But because we only need two parallel faces for our connection to work, it was easily achieved. Well, it wasn't easily achieved, but let's say it was easily installed because we did a lot of testing on this project. But now all this testing is available for your project. So that's really good. So let's go for my final tip here. You can reduce the length of the screw used in the connection if you have edge distance problem. For example, if the tilt here is too much and the screw is gonna be too close to the edge distance here, you can reduce the screw length. And that's only for the secondary beam. And this is because of the improved end grain angle. Because you're not directly in the end grain anymore, the connection is stronger and all that. So you can reduce the screw length. Okay, so what were the objectives of the webinar? We were answering three questions: what, why, how. So what is the beam hanger? It's a simple and adaptable pre-engineered solution, especially designed for mass timber. So why do we say it's cost effective? Because it's pre-installed, pre-engineered, and easily concealed. And finally, how to use the beam hanger? It's with the design guide, which provides step-by-step, detailed, and adaptable instructions. So also know that the beam hanger has an ICC approval pending, and we're working on that right now. So thank you for attending, and now we'll be answering some questions. So if you have any question, you can ask them in the panel here. You can go through our website at mightycon.com, or you can go directly to the technical support at support@mightycon.com. So I would like to thank the Oregon Forest Resource Institute as well for the pictures and the video. And to finish the presentation, and while we wait for questions, I would like to present you a picture of the first tech project. That's the inside of the project once it was done. So you can see how all the connections are concealed and everything. And the 8 pages is a case study on this project, and they talked about cost saving and the advantages of pre-installation. And the basics are that through prefabrication and coordination, they save 4% of the cost compared to a steel structure. And they built the whole thing in 4 fewer months than a normal steel structure. So that's pretty interesting. So if you have any questions now, once again, you can ask them through the chat, but I don't see any questions right now. So you can simply email us if you have questions. And also everyone will just email you the questions. We'll email you the rest of the the answer for your questions. So I'll let Agata finish the presentation right now. So Agata, here to you.
And we're excited to offer you a 15% discount on our Heavy and Mass Timber Handbook to all attendees of the webinar, and the discount will be going out in the follow-up email. The handbook includes our structural screw design guide, timber collection solutions brochure, rigging design guide, and exclusive to the handbook is a copy of the American CLT Connections design guide that outlines special design considerations with cross-laminated timber. And I would also like to thank everybody for joining today. As a reminder, you will receive an email on Monday with the recording of the session, slides, Q&A, as well as a survey where you can get your certificate of attendance. If you have any further questions, you can contact us at info@mightycon.com.